June 28, 1914. A city street in Bosnia. A royal motorcade moving slowly through a crowd. One man steps forward, 2 shots fired, and within weeks the world is at war. Not a war between two countries. Not a regional conflict, a world war. The kind that would kill 17 million people, destroy 4 empires, and redraw the map of the entire planet. It started with those 2 shots, but to understand why the whole world followed, we need to go back a little further and look at what was quietly building beneath the surface. By 1914, Europe looked stable on the surface. The continent had not seen a major war in nearly half a century. Cities were thriving. Technology was advancing. Newspapers were full of optimism. But underneath all of that, something dangerous had been growing for decades, and Europe had divided itself into 2 armed camps. On one side, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, the Triple Alliance. On the other, France, Russia, and Britain, the Triple Entente. Each side had pledged to defend the other if attacked. It was designed to keep the peace through fear. If you attacked one, you attacked all of them. What no one fully grasped was that this system was also a loaded gun. One wrong move, one unexpected crisis, and the whole thing could trigger automatically. And then there was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, one of the largest and most complicated empires in the world, stretching across Central Europe and containing dozens of different ethnic groups, cultures, and languages. Many of those groups did not want to be part of Austria-Hungary. They wanted independence. They wanted nations of their own. And one of those groups was the Slavs, particularly in the Balkans, a region that had already seen 2 wars just in the previous 2 years. And at the center of Slavic nationalist ambition stood a small but fiercely proud country, Serbia. Serbia had already expanded its territory after the Balkan Wars, and it had bigger ambitions. Its dream was a unified South Slav state, a kingdom that would bring together all Slavic peoples in the region under one banner. Austria-Hungary saw this as an existential threat. A united Slavic state on its border could inspire the Slavs within its own empire to break away. For Vienna, Serbia had to be contained. These 2 forces, Austro-Hungarian control and Slavic nationalism, were on a direct collision course. All it needed was a spark, and the spark came in the form of 2 men who had almost nothing in common. The first was Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, not by birth, but by tragedy. His cousin, Crown Prince Rudolf, had died in a suicide pact in 1889, and his own father had renounced the line of succession. So this man, ambitious and restless, found himself next in line to rule one of the most powerful empires in the world. He was, by most accounts, a difficult person, reserved, blunt, often irritable. He clashed with the old aristocracy of Vienna who found him too modern. He was a hunter with a legendary obsession. His personal diary records over 270,000 kills during his lifetime, which tells you something about his personality. But he also had a more progressive side. He believed the empire needed reform. Yet while many in Vienna wanted to crush the Slavic minority, Franz Ferdinand had floated the idea of reorganizing the empire to give Slavic peoples more political power, a kind of third kingdom within the empire, alongside Austria and Hungary. His enemies in the Serbian nationalist movement didn't know, or didn't care, about these ideas. To them, he represented the empire that was blocking their dream. And if he came to power and offered Slavic peoples what they wanted peacefully, it might actually weaken the case for violent revolution. So, in a cruel irony, the man who might have offered the most moderate path forward became the target. The second man was Gavrilo Princip. Princip was 19 years old in 1914. He was born in a small village in Bosnia, a region that had only recently been annexed by Austria-Hungary, a move that had outraged Serbian nationalists. He was thin, sickly, and had been rejected by the Serbian military for being too small and physically unfit. He was a young man who felt powerless, who burned with ideology, and who had absorbed every word of the nationalist cause. He believed deeply and without doubt that the South Slavic peoples deserved freedom. He believed that violence was a legitimate, perhaps the only, path to political change. He admired the heroes of nationalist uprisings. He wanted to be one of them. Princip was connected to a secret organization called the Black Hand, a Serbian nationalist group with ties to Serbian military intelligence. The Black Hand believed in armed struggle. Its members had been smuggling weapons and training fighters for years, and they saw the Archduke's visit to Sarajevo as an opportunity that could not be ignored. The plan was simple in theory: assassinate Franz Ferdinand during his official visit, provoke Austria-Hungary, and ignite a crisis that would ultimately free the South Slavic people from Austro-Hungarian rule. A small group of young men, most of them barely older than teenagers, was recruited for the job. They were given weapons, trained briefly, and positioned along the route of the Archduke's motorcade. June 28, 1914 was not a random date. It was the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo, one of the most sacred and painful moments in Serbian history. A 14th century battle that had become a symbol of Serbian sacrifice and resistance. Choosing this day was deliberate. It was meant to send a message. Franz Ferdinand was visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, on an official military inspection. His wife, Sophie, was at his side. It was, in some ways, a rare moment of personal happiness for the couple. Their marriage had been controversial because Sophie came from a lesser noble family and the Viennese court had never fully accepted her. Outside of Vienna, the restrictions on her status were relaxed. On this trip, she could sit beside her husband in public and be treated as his equal. Security was light. The route had been publicly announced. The motorcade would move through the main boulevard along the Miljacka River, lined with crowds. 7 young assassins had spread themselves along that route. Each had a weapon. Each had a mission. One of the assassins, Nedeljko Čebrinović, was positioned near the river. As the motorcade passed the WW1, he activated his grenade and threw it at the Archduke's car. He missed. The grenade bounced off the back of the car and exploded under the following vehicle, wounding several people inside and a number of bystanders. Čebrinović, realizing he had failed, swallowed a cyanide capsule and jumped into the river. The cyanide was old and didn't work. The river was only a few inches deep. He was pulled out, beaten by the crowd, and arrested. Franz Ferdinand's motorcade sped up and rushed towards City Hall, where the official reception was still scheduled to take place. The Archduke arrived shaken but composed. He gave his speech. He was angry. He reportedly said with some bitterness that he had come to Sarajevo and been greeted with bombs. Then came a decision that changed everything. Yet Franz Ferdinand insisted on visiting the hospital, where the people wounded in the grenade attack had been taken. It was the right thing to do. His security adjusted the route, but someone forgot to tell the driver. The motorcade set off again. The lead driver, following the original route out of habit, turned onto Franz Joseph Street, the wrong turn. The general in charge of security, riding in the car ahead, shouted at him to stop. The driver braked. The car stalled. Right in front of Schiller's Delicatessen, and standing on the pavement just feet away, was Gavrilo Princip. He had given up. After the failed grenade attack, after watching the motorcade speed away, he assumed the day was lost. He had wandered into a nearby shop. He stepped back outside, and there, stopped directly in front of him, and was the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. Princip didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, drew his pistol, and fired twice. The first bullet struck Franz Ferdinand in the jugular vein. The second struck Sophie in the abdomen. The car sped toward the governor's residence. In the car, Franz Ferdinand was heard whispering to his wife, Sophie, sterbe nicht. Sophie dear, don't die. She was gone within minutes. He died shortly after. Gavrilo Princip was seized immediately. He was 19 years old, too young under Austro-Hungarian law to be executed. He would be sentenced to 20 years in prison, where he died of tuberculosis in 1918. The same year the war he helped ignite finally ended. In the chaos and grief that followed, almost no one could have predicted what those 2 shots would set in motion. And Austria-Hungary was furious. The assassination was blamed, with some accuracy, on Serbian nationalist networks. Vienna wanted revenge. More than revenge, it wanted to destroy Serbia's capacity to threaten the empire once and for all. But Austria-Hungary didn't act alone. It consulted with Germany first. Kaiser Wilhelm II and his government issued what became known as the blank check, an assurance that Germany would support Austria-Hungary no matter what action it chose to take. Armed with that guarantee, Austria-Hungary issued Serbia an ultimatum on July 23rd, a list of demands so extreme, so deliberately humiliating, that they were designed to be rejected. Serbia accepted nearly all of them. It refused one point, that Austro-Hungarian officials be allowed to conduct their own investigations inside Serbia, which would amount to surrendering its sovereignty. It was enough. On July 28th, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and then the alliances kicked in. Russia, which saw itself as the protector of Slavic peoples, began mobilizing its military in support of Serbia. Germany, bound to Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia. France was allied with Russia, so Germany declared war on France too. To attack France quickly, Germany invaded Belgium. And Britain, which had a treaty guaranteeing Belgian neutrality, declared war on Germany. Within 6 weeks of those two shots on a Sarajevo street, nearly every major power in Europe was at war. The system built to prevent catastrophe had instead guaranteed it. Every alliance, every mobilization plan, and every calculation based on deterrence had snapped tight like a trap. What followed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. 17 million people were killed. 20 million more were wounded. The fighting dragged on for 4 years across trenches, deserts, oceans, and mountains. Soldiers lived in mud, died from poison gas, and were sent wave after wave into machine gun fire. 4 empires collapsed entirely: the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire. Dynasties that had ruled for centuries simply ceased to exist. The map of the world was redrawn. New countries were carved out of the wreckage. Borders were shifted. Populations were displaced. And the resentments that came out of the peace agreement, particularly in Germany, which was blamed, punished, and humiliated, planted the seeds for another, even larger conflict just 2 decades later. World War I didn't just end. It created the conditions for World War II. World War II reshaped the entire modern world. All of it. Every battle, every empire's collapse, every border on the map today, traces a line back to that morning in Sarajevo. History rarely turns on a single moment. Usually it builds through years of decisions, policies, and pressures, until something finally breaks. But June 28, 1914, was one of those rare moments where everything converged. The instability of the Balkans, the pride of empires, the rage of a young nationalist, a wrong turn by a driver. A man standing on the pavement had given up and stepped outside. Gavrilo Princip didn't cause World War I by himself. The alliances, the arms race, and the imperial ambitions, the nationalism, all of those were already in place. The powder was already there. He just lit the match, and the world that existed before those 2 shots, the old order, the old empires, the old certainties, never came back. One moment, one man, one wrong turn. The world changed forever.